Hi, friends. This is Donniel Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi. And this is, for heaven's sake, podcast from the Shalom Hartman Institute. And this is Israel at War, day 389. And the title for today's podcast is one that upsets Yossi very, very much. But you agreed to it.
Reluctantly.
And I just want to say how happy I am. I missed you last week, and I'm sure many of our listeners did as well. We decided to call this Netanyahu's moment and to reflect on this moment.
So you decided to call it that, and I very grudgingly went along.
And you grudgingly went along. I'll take that as long as you went along. But before we get into it itself, this is a very complicated moment. Just an hour or so ago, another 4 soldiers were announced had been killed in northern Gaza. There are now 34 active shivas, families sitting shiva, actively now, all across Israel.
And some here in Jerusalem.
Many here, and of colleagues of ours, friends of ours. So it's a lot of good people are dying, and it's a very heavy moment. But despite this heavy moment, and maybe that's also part of it, but there's been a re-emerging, almost like a phoenix, of Netanyahu's stature for the first time since, I think, a month after the election, 2 years ago. Netanyahu ceased being the preferred candidate for prime minister. Gantz beat him. Lapid sometimes beat him or was close to him. The Likud lost, went from 32 or 33 down to 20, 18, 19. We're talking about 40% of its support. Gantz's party mushroomed to 40-something. And there was a sense that after the election and the forming of the coalition and the decision of that coalition to first embark on a massive judicial overhaul, and the way that was handled by Netanyahu and his coalition, and then the tremendous failure that happens under Netanyahu's watch, some of it his responsibility, some of it not, we'll leave aside for now, whether what's known in Israel as the conceptia, the concept, the notion that Hamas is not a danger and could be contained with Qatari money. Who's responsible or not? Either way, it happened under his watch. And Netanyahu was we were eulogizing him. And just yesterday in the most recent poll, after 2 years, it's 2 years almost since the election, he's now the number 1 preferred candidate for prime minister, beats out even Bennett, not to speak of Lapid and Gantz.
But he still can form a coalition.
His party is now up from the lows of 16, is now polling at 26. 26. The drop from 32 to 26 is not a huge drop. And so there's something emerging. Israelis are beginning to feel that maybe Netanyahu is okay. And I'm not intending to aggravate you today, Yossi.
Too late.
I know. But listen, as you said, begrudgingly or not, you agreed. We have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's Iran, the remarkably successful attack in Iran, the killing of Sinwar, the beepers, what seems to be a successful operation so far in southern Lebanon. There's something. The hostages are there, but the casualties
attack on Iran was really extraordinary.
So how do we understand this moment? There's so many nuances to it. Let's try to unpack it, because I'm trying to figure it out myself. Like, what did people forget? Like, what's going? How do you understand it?
Well, first of all, I think that whoever would be prime minister would almost certainly have the same achievements, because the army was ready in southern Lebanon in a way that it was not in Gaza, and the Air Force was ready in Iran. This is something that they've been preparing for years. Now, I would be happy to give Netanyahu the credit if he were to take responsibility for his disastrous failures And he only shows up when it's good news. And we never hear from him. He never comforts the nation when we go through tragedies. It took him a full day on October 7th before he perfunctorily addressed the nation. And it was just the most appalling performance. And everyone is always to blame but him, except when it comes time for the credit, it's always him. So that's just my getting that off my chest.
Does that make you feel a little better?
No. Even just saying it makes me feel slightly
because I'm
ill.
looking at you.
Makes me feel ill.
I'm feeling the whole. I'm a little worried about this podcast.
I know.
No, I see you, and I don't. I love you. I don't want to hurt you, but like we got to talk. There's something. This is a big thing.
Something going on.
So what's going on that you? Like, we have to give the guy credit. There's something going on.
No,
because the most you could have done was. I don't want to give him credit because anybody else would have gotten credit too. But okay, so we got that off.
Yeah.
And now, could you?
The one thing that I'll say half in his favor, and it really is only half, is that Netanyahu, I believe, is motivated most of all, even more than his pathological need to hold on to power after 16 years to still be the prime minister. He has an obsession with ensuring that October 7th is not the last word on his legacy. Now, when I say that that's a half to his credit, it's because it gives him a tremendous incentive to be an effective prime minister in wartime. Where I find that incentive deeply problematic is that he's not placing the interests of the country first. He's placing his own needs first. In this case, his needs for the moment happen to coincide with the needs of the country. We needed these victories. And so he's obsessed with undoing October 7th, and that's good. That's good for the country. Until we get to a point, and we may have reached that point in Gaza already, where it's time to move on, it's time to wrap it up, and he can't let go. So there is a potential clash here between his need to restore his legacy and the country's need to determine its priorities.
I want to give him more credit, and I feel like I have to apologize for you too first.
It's funny. I will not call him Bibi because it's too intimate. It's too friendly. I will only call him Netanyahu.
I don't call him Bibi because I think it's disrespectful. I feel that if somebody's the prime minister of Israel, or even a minister, you should, Netanyahu, mention the last name. It's like Mr.
Ben Gvir.
Mr. Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir pushes it, but there's something about it. It's still, after all, the prime minister, and so I do honor him and his past, etc. So for me, it's not the intimacy. It's a sign of respect, even when I disagree with him. But
see, it's not for me. It's not disagreement. It's not about political disagreement.
It's so
much
about
deeper. Decency. It's about preserving and enhancing the solidarity and the unity of Israelis instead of constantly undermining. This is what gets to me.
I know.
So it's really not the disagreement. Okay. I don't have a disagreement with him.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I don't respect him enough to give him credit that we're actually arguing about policy. It's not about policy.
Okay.
No. I have more.
I know.
But go ahead. I
know. It's very cute. I'm watching you. I'm reading your writing. You're very cute. This is a tough one for you, but I want to push through if I can. The attack in Iran was brilliant. And it wasn't just brilliant because of the Air Force's capabilities. For me, the attack in Iran is the way Israel has to conduct audacious and dangerous military operations and how it uses its force. The attack in Iran was not an overstep. The attack in Iran was not a strutting. The attack in Iran didn't even serve political interest in the maximum way possible. When Netanyahu forbids all of his ministers to talk about it. Don't strut. Don't poke your eye. We realize that this is dangerous. Netanyahu, at his best, uses Israel's military capacities very responsible, careful manner. And it's more than that. We didn't just do whatever we wanted. We were coordinated with America, which is a recognition of what are Israel's more significant strategic needs. We reached out to America. We worked with them. We spoke, unlike throughout the war, when we could have been more coordinated, we chose not to be coordinated. We chose to fight. We chose to distance ourselves. We chose to be, Trumpers or to elevate the accusation that Biden, not to speak of Kamala Harris, are weak on Israel and all. Like, there were so many things that we did. At this attack, it's gone. Gone. There was no hesitation. We didn't say we called America. And Biden...
Apparently, we even called the Iranians.
But it's like we coordinated. And Biden, when has there been a president in the history, in Israel's history, who has responded in the way that he has responded? Putting the additional air defenses here with American troops, which is a whole issue that we have to talk about. It's also part of Netanyahu's moment. Coordinating forces, coordinating with other enemies or other allies. And immediately afterwards, defending Israel. It was an example of we don't have to work alone. We're not alone, the Netanyahu idea, we are alone and it's our power. Not at all. And immediately the United States and France.
You were still on let us now praise Netanyahu.
Yes, but he's created this. By doing this, you see that he created this possibility. And I think, for some Israelis, it wasn't enough. I wanted more blood. And this was an example of a Netanyahu who said to Israeli society, trust me, I know this is dangerous. I didn't take on the nuclear facilities. I didn't take on even their oil production facilities or ports. It was limited. It was controlled. It was modest. You're right. He took credit for it as distinct from his failures. But if we look at it, I think Israeli society was not just happy with the outcome, because it was a very strange thing. Even the first 24 hours, we didn't even know, it was great. What did we attack? We still don't even know exactly what we hit and what we didn't hit, right, and why it was so significant. We hit their missile fuel mixing facilities. Like, okay. But
there were these great tweets on Israelis' social media of showing kitchen mixers and how big was the mixer
and how many, and it's going to take years. So you don't even know what the spin is. But
right.
I think part of why this is Netanyahu's moment is that Israelis are giving him a second look. And they're saying, yeah, you did okay. This was not about your political interests. This is about Israel's interests. And your political interests didn't need you to coordinate with America. And your political interests didn't need you to limit. And your political interests weren't served by the fact that you didn't let any of your ministers come forth. So I appreciate how difficult it is, but I have to tell you and I don't dislike Netanyahu as much as you do. By me, there's a much deeper policy space between us. And I also, I am deeply angry for his politicization of so many things and of war. But we won't get into that. But
I think we should.
But there is
because
at this moment,
part of the
I appreciate it. But at this moment, Israelis are looking for somebody, and Gantz and Lapid aren't even in the ballpark of this.
No, but
sense.
Bennett is. Bennett certainly is.
Bennett maybe is. So he's close.
Yeah.
His party, by the way, is not greater than the. So there is a moment.
He doesn't have a party.
I know, but in the polls. But in the polls.
Yeah, but we don't even know who's running with him.
No, but in the prior polls, his party was the largest party. It's now smaller than Likud is now the largest party. So either way, I want to give voice to something that I think many Israelis are feeling, that October 7th was chaos, and this was a non-chaotic, non-political moment. And I think some of the trust is clearly returning. Whether it'll stay that way or not, something is happening.
So I'll come to the trust in a moment. I want to get back to...
Am I wrong, by the way, first? Do you think I'm wrong?
Are there growing numbers of Israelis who
it's my analysis
I think
of the way he conducted this. Would you say, instead of complimenting him, was there some complimentary elements to the way this was conducted and its totality?
I'm one of those Israelis who wanted more. I didn't want more blood, but I wanted more substantive target. I wanted the nuclear facilities, but I've wanted the nuclear facilities for 15 years. And I felt this was really our opportunity, except for one major obstacle, which is we're a week before the American elections. And here I grudgingly accept that we could not
I've done it now.
we could not have attacked the nuclear facilities or certainly the oil refineries a week before the elections. That was inconceivable. So given that constraint, I'm reasonably pleased with what we did. What, for me, the most impressive operational aspect of this was that we didn't attack Iran with missiles. We sent in 150 planes. We sent in pilots. And they went in, they knocked out Iran's air defenses, and we ruled the skies over Iran for 3 hours. That's a message. And that, I thought, in some ways, was the most successful.
That goes back to your point already now for over a year.
Of deterrence.
The greatest danger of October 7th was the losing of our deterrence.
Yeah. So having complete freedom of action in the skies of Iran is as clear a restoration of our deterrence as we're likely to get in this war. In terms of trusting Netanyahu, and I'm going to leave aside everything for a moment and just speak about Netanyahu as a military commander. It's premature, for me at least, to deliver that
credit.
No,
a
revisionist assessment of post-October 7th Netanyahu. And the reason I say that is that this is a guy who made stopping a nuclear Iran his number one priority for the last 20 years. Under Netanyahu, Iran has reached the nuclear threshold. That is an historic failure. So yes, we had a very successful, limited operation. We need to see what happens with Iran's nuclear program. And if Netanyahu allows Iran to go nuclear, then October 7th will be not a footnote, but it will be a far smaller disaster. And so Netanyahu already has on his name the greatest security failure in Israel's history. And the verdict is not out yet about Iran by a long shot.
Fair enough. But it's interesting that at this moment there is a shift in Israeli society. They're shifting more quickly than you are. And again, they could shift back very, very quickly. I think I want to introduce another.
You know what I do hear from people, though?
Yes.
People who are less grudging than I am in giving him credit for the successes of the last few months. They'll say, okay, we need him in there to clean up the mess that he created. And as soon as this is over, he's out.
Okay.
Now, Netanyahu loves to compare himself to Churchill. And really, if this is the best Israel can do for our version of Churchill, we're really in trouble.
I have yes.
But
okay.
You know, you
realize how sensitive I'm being to you?
You're being great, Donniel. But if there is any comparison between Netanyahu and Churchill, I hope it will be in the following way.
That he loses.
Immediately after World War II, when World War II ended, the British public threw Churchill out.
Great.
Thank you very much. Now go retire.
So, sometimes
I will not say thank you very much, but I will say, okay.
Some of
you tried to clean up your mess. Very good. Now go retire.
Yossi, be careful, because some of our listeners complain about Donniel over moralizing. Why don't you talk? Why is it always this? You are being slightly repetitive. So
I'm just getting
You're just
going.
starting. Just no. But I want to shift it a little bit to a different part of Netanyahu's moment, because whether we like it or not, he's not disappearing, and more than that, he's rising and growing in prominence. There's another interesting feature of this moment, because I think about it a lot. I'm trying to understand what's happening. Nobody's talking to Israeli society about anything. This moment is one of the strangest moments that we have had, that I've experienced since I moved to Israel in 1971. And then we didn't even have adequate communication. But if I compare what I knew about the Yom Kippur War, where we were, what we were facing, the reports, etc.
Yeah.
Now we are in Lebanon now, 3 weeks? 30, the amount of people who are dying, terrible deaths of reservists who are in their 200 plus days. Very little debate going on. But it's interesting. We don't even know what the army's doing. We get little piecemeal reports of great successes. It seems that the army's doing its work. It's doing its job. It's uncovering and taking apart a huge infrastructure, which, unlike the 700-kilometer infrastructure in Gaza, is something that we could actually take apart.
You're talking about the tunnels.
The tunnels and the command and control. I hate this word, command and control centers, because it more or less is just a room. But the whole infrastructure that Hezbollah had built, which was really terrorizing the north. And for the last 3 weeks, there's been no anti-tank attacks. We've removed that capability, which requires direct 5 to 10 kilometer attacks. So the army is doing its work. Do we know where they are? Are they 5 kilometers from the border? Have we cleaned that out? Are they at the Litani?
Look,
do we want to go to 17?
We don't know where we are in terms of the hostages negotiations. We don't know where we are in Gaza. We don't know anything.
In Gaza, we know a little. Hostage negotiations, we don't know. There are things happening behind the scenes. In Gaza, we know what the army's doing, and we know the dangers, and every few days they succeed in blowing up and killing officers and soldiers and beautiful people. And we realize, so now we're in Jabalia. The other places were much less significant. So at every given time, we know that the strategy of the army is to pull back, allow Hamas to concentrate its troops so that it has the aspiration or the hope that it is reclaiming some political control. The minute there's a concentration of Hamas terrorists walking around, Israel quickly encloses the area and then gets to work with all that it entails, and there's serious humanitarian challenges, all of the above. We've sort of figured out what the army is doing, and I think Hamas did that as well. With the hostages, the government says no, but maybe there's a yes going on that we don't know about. Lebanon, we don't have a clue.
So what does it say to you?
Great. So this was my just description. One of the reasons for Netanyahu's moment is that Netanyahu, I believe, has learned. You never tell Israelis what you're going to do. You never articulate what you're going to do in a political platform, in a clearly articulated vision, because everybody in Israel knows that every plan is flawed. So the minute he presents the plan, the society is going to critique it. His coalition members are going to critique it because there'll never be enough killing for Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. They want another day all the time, everything. So the way to do it is not to talk. But what that does is it destabilizes the citizen as the sovereign, and it removes or moves the power to Netanyahu, who's going to sit with it and say, trust me.
See, I think that you're once again giving him far too much credit. Netanyahu, I believe, does not have a strategy. He doesn't have a goal. He's all tactics. And the tactics are working. But where are we going? And the defense minister, Gallant, just said this the other day. He asked Netanyahu, what's the end game? What's the end game in Gaza? What's the end game in Lebanon? The defense minister doesn't know. And so that's what worries me. Now, you and I have spoken a great deal about the absence of a morning after political plan for Gaza. But what if there isn't an end game militarily? And this is what Gallant was really challenging Netanyahu about. Where are we heading? And so what worries me about Netanyahu, just in this limited context, is he winging it? Is it all flash? And that's a serious consideration. And in terms of our Israeli Churchill, we have been in the worst year of this country's existence. Can you think of a single memorable speech that he's given? One moment, where he inspired his country?
So what am I doing? I'm not claiming Netanyahu as a strategy. I'm trying to understand this moment of his resurfacing. And I'm wondering if most Israelis aren't like you and I. That most Israelis, the Lapid was always known as the man who has a platform, he has 200 pages worked out on everything. Now, everybody in Israel knows that every plan is flawed. And so instead of voting for a plan, I want to vote for the person, who I'll trust at the end will work it out. I'm wondering whether exactly, he's never spoken, but the reason for this moment is that it's working. Not vis-a-vis the will, it's working on the citizens. He's sort of lulling his base back, because it's his base. He's not undermining the other base. His base is coming back to what was known as King Bibi.
Listen,
there's a King Bibi.
So it so happens yesterday I was in a taxi and I nearly got thrown out of the taxi because we had a fight. The driver and I had a fight about the prime minister. And he says to me, give me one instance, just one, where the prime minister ever lied to this country. And I was speechless. I said, his whole being is a lie. And then I said to him, and this is where he almost threw me out of the taxi.
We could have given him specifics.
He said, I said to him, it's what a shame that Netanyahu wasn't the prime minister on October 7th. Things would have turned out completely differently if only he'd been there.
Listen, we have lists of what he's done or not done, but it's just, I'm almost amazed. You're angry.
What does it say? Okay, let's get to that question. What does it tell us about our fellow Israelis?
It tells us about our fellow Israelis.
Maybe it tells us that they're desperate. People are desperate.
Do you know what it is? There's a theological statement, in Psalm says, Gam ke'elech b'geit salmavet atah imadi. Even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, you're still with me.
They didn't mean the Israeli Churchill.
No, but what I think part of what it is that people want to know that in moments of chaos, there's somebody who could help us.
Mr. Chaos.
So
Mr.
I know,
Chaos himself.
But I'm not arguing with you, but the polls are saying
I know. So
this is what I'm trying to tell you. So what I'm trying to tell you is that precisely, and this is his cleverness, precisely by not articulating a clear plan, he has destabilized the citizens just saying, forget plans. Everybody has plans. Gallant has plans, Gantz has plans, Lapid has plans.
Do you know what's so painful?
I'm the one. Right. I'm there with you. And I'm trying to tell you that as distinct from Yossi, your taxi driver, he's forgotten all of his lies. Because he's been lying. You couldn't give him an example of lies? I could give you lists. The bottom line is that people are beginning to trust him because as they see the war coming to an end, they see the success. The army is now powerful again. And they know that every plan is going to be imperfect. And maybe he'll be the one, just like he did in Iran, he'll at the end be the one who will bring us back to some level of stability.
I think this tells us something deeply worrying and depressing about post-October 7th Israel, which is that people are so demoralized, so desperate, so confused that they're hanging on to any hope, even if it comes from the source that brought us to this abyss in the first place. And I was talking with a young person the other day, terrific kid, does just extraordinary work in Israeli society. And he said to me, I'm looking at the polls. He said, the moment I see that Netanyahu can form the next government, I'm making plans to leave. Now, this is someone served in a combat unit, loves Israel. He's devoted his life to serving Israel. And he said, there'll be no future here for my kids.
See, that's
part of
Netanyahu. That's part of the Netanyahu moment. There's consequences. We're a deeply split society. But what we wanted to do today,
I think that must be part of the calculus.
I agree with you. But
how many people will leave?
But that's not the calculus
if Netanyahu wins again.
That's fair enough. But right now, he's number one, and his party is the largest. He still, by the way, can't form a coalition. But for the first time,
Baruch Hashem,
he can. Well, thank God. But he still can't. He's far from a coalition. He's at 51. He's not even close, not even remotely close to the coalition. But still, it's a complicated moment. And I think when he put forth the judicial reform, it was an example of a clear policy that Israelis looked at and said, this is not the Israel that I want. And so instead of articulating policy, he prefers between him and Dermer, very talented, intelligent man, between him and Dermer and maybe Barnea, just to deal things behind.
The head of the Mossad.
The head of the Mossad. Trust me, I'll handle it. And just when the deal is done, put it forth. And there's something happening. And maybe in the midst of all this confusion, there's not a clear path forward. And when there's not a clear path forward, you ask, who do you trust right now? And much to our surprise and to both of our deep chagrin, is that the right word?
For me, the word is revulsion.
Revulsion. Okay, for me, it's chagrin. It's not revulsion. This is a moment, and it's a moment. But in this moment, there's a lot of also bad things happening. These 4 soldiers who just were killed today, or
Every day.
They were in Gaza, and what people know why they're serving in Lebanon, but what another 3 months of war in Gaza is going to achieve, nobody knows anymore, and it's going to be challenging. Last words, Yossi.
Yeah,
depending obviously on what you say, but last
words.
Well,
this is going to open up a whole other direction, but I can't resist. And that is that the Knesset winter session just opened, and what will likely be voted on sooner or later in the coming months will be the mass deferment of the ultra-Orthodox. And if Netanyahu's government pushes that through, whatever popularity he has
I'll give you
is going to
see,
dissipate.
But that's an example, I think, of exactly what I meant, is that he's benefited these last 4 months. What is it, 3 months in which the Knesset was in, how do you say pagra in English?
Recess.
Was in recess. Now there's going to be policies again, which he's going to be judged by. We'll see. But at this moment, if you want to understand Israel, you have to recognize that this is a moment. Friends, Yossi, it's a pleasure to be with you.
It always is.
I hope I didn't aggravate you too much.
We did okay.
I think we did okay. This is Israel at War, day 389. And we're going to have to talk more about the hostages, possible deals. They're still not home. That has to come to an end. Anyway, friends, be well.
This episode of For Heaven's Sake is sponsored by Eileen and Howard Dubner, in honor of their grandchildren, Molly, Nate, Emma, Emmett, Asher, and Ethan Dubner. You too can sponsor an episode of For Heaven's Sake, Israel at War. The link to donate can be found in the show notes or at shalomhartman.org/For Heaven's Sake. We will acknowledge your gift on a future episode. For more ideas from the Shalom Hartman Institute about what's unfolding right now, sign up for our newsletter in the show notes or visit shalomhartman.org/Israel at War.